Tonight we're going to do our first Bunker BS live. Me, Woody, and Jason kind of spur of the moment. Watch this AFSA video with the three chiefs on the panel, and I got a little fired up. So I shot him a note today. I said, "Hey, who wants to chit chat about AFSA and BMT changes?" And then some other things came online, like checking boxes. I came through a gate today, and then there's some shit going on at work that Jason and I have talked about. About checking boxes. So just wanted to have a session tonight to talk about that AFSFA. AFSFA, if you don't know, is Air Force Sergeant Association. They do an annual conference. I'm not sure where they're at this year. Either one of you guys know where they're at this year?
I'm not sure. No.
Yeah, don't know. But anyway, so they had this panel of, I think it was ATC chief, the 2nd Air Force chief, and the Air University chief. And they were talking about a bunch of different things. Mainly BMT changes, which led into tech school. There's PME changes. I don't necessarily have a lot to talk about with the PME changes. There are some things that are, I guess I consider kind of drastic, like the CCAF going away. I don't know what you guys think about that.
Well, I don't know that necessarily said it was going away. They just were talking about the accreditation for the PME courses, not for senior NCO not having credits, right? But CCF as a whole not going away.
No. Getting a credit when you go to Senior NCO Academy for CCF is no longer a thing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, dude, like one of them said, what is it, 90% have their CCF by then? And if you don't, come on, man, what are you really doing?
Right.
Yeah, right. I think it's a good first step. I've always been a proponent of CCAF. I've always advocated for CCAF. For me and a lot of other folks, CCAF was a springboard onto higher level degrees. And I know CCAF has its haters, but I do like the fact that they're no longer letting CCAF accreditation stand in the way of the type of training we need.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing because there was always, I'm sure you guys dealt with it, there was always these, not necessarily boards, but all these criteria that you had to meet in order to go. And if you didn't have your CCF, then this, and then it was just this big box checking thing that just became a non-player, in my opinion. But we can get to some of that stuff here in a little bit. But mainly I wanted to talk about, these proposed BMT changes, basic military training. So the first part that, I don't want to say irritated me, kind of caught me off guard was, when I got to tech school, one of the first things I noticed was there were, and I have nothing against officers at all. I just think that when you're at an enlisted thing, it should be the enlisted people pushing the changes with the support of the officer corps. That's just my opinion. But the first thing that the chief talked about was, the first kudo that I want to put out there is to retired General so-and-so. Without him, we wouldn't be here. Why is that, do you guys think? Why isn't there thanks to Chief so-and-so or Chief so-and-so, Chief so-and-so, and Chief so-and-so? Without those chiefs pushing and grinding, we wouldn't be here today making these potential changes.
Well, I'm sure there was some chiefs involved, but you probably had that officer that was more passionate about it than others and probably got through some of the red tape or some of the bureaucracy that an enlisted couldn't, right? Because as an enlisted, we can sound the alarm, we can say something's bullshit, but we need that O to push it over the line. It's not us doing that. And I do think that's probably more in line with what that role was.
Yeah, I'm sure the chiefs and the enlisted corps did most of the heavy lifting, and not to take anything away from what the general did, but to Jason's point, sometimes the credibility or the positional authority, you need that person in your pocket to get it over the line, unfortunately. But I'm sure, again, I don't want to discredit anything he may have done or may not have done, but I'm sure the chiefs did all the, and the senior NCOs did all the heavy lifting, did all the research, put all the pieces in place, and packaged it up nice and neat, and handed it off to the general and said, "Sir, this is what we want to do," and he put the rubber stamp on it.
Yeah, maybe I I don't know, misunderstood what he said, but I thought he said that, you know, he was the primary driver. Maybe I just misunderstood what the chief was saying. So, yeah.
I also, though, I'm sorry, I do have one other thought about that, right? Like, have you ever had a commander where they had an idea and the enlisted force was the stopper? You know, your senior NCOs were the, oh, that we can't do that, or that's stupid, or whatever. And that one officer, that commander or OPSO, was like, cool story, but we're going to do this. And then it ended up being a great thing. I've had that a couple times, both in security forces units and in other units I was a part of. The things that they wanted to do were totally against what anything looked like traditionally or what we were used to. So the senior NCOs were that blocking force. The commanders continuously pushed it and made us get on board, and then it ended up being a very positive thing. And so maybe that was what that general did. He was the guy like, no, I'm not going to let no be the answer. Let's get this through, you know, and kind of, I don't know the word I want to say, pushed it through, or just didn't stop, didn't give up.
Well, and there's something to be, you know, as an Air Force, we've done things, not that we haven't evolved, because we certainly have, but by and large, we do things, we have done things the same way for decades on end.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
we just iterate on the same things, and you know that makes people comfortable, that makes leadership comfortable, and a lot of those things are tried and true. So, you know, I love the plan that they talked us through in the AFSA chat, but I'm sure it had its detractors and brick walls on its way to getting approved. So, you know, again, to piggyback on your statement, Jason, you know, the general might be the guy that was like, nope, we need to do this. This is the right time to do this, and we're not going to take no for an answer.
Yeah,
Well,
I think it's very, very interesting because Woody, I was telling Jason at work, you know, I was at the 343rd, my last assignment, which was, for those listening, if you don't know, was tech school, the Security Forces tech school. And at the time, Security Forces was going through the same type of drill. And maybe that's where this was spawned from. I don't know, but there was an identity problem. Some people thought there was an identity problem, and some things happened downrange and some other stuff, and we needed to restamp Defender and do these things. And there was this huge push to overhaul tech school and overhaul all these things, and it's still being done today, and that's 3 years after I retired, and it was 2 years in the works while I was on. So we're at 5 years now where this reinvigoration of defend the base was happening, and I got so much pushback and so much hate that it was crazy. I just in my world, I was like, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and everybody's going to drink this Kool-Aid. Well, there were a lot of people that didn't want any Kool-Aid, and they didn't even want to see the word Kool-Aid anywhere. So this is very, very, very similar, just on a much bigger scale. So it's kind of crazy to me to try to understand how they're going to make this happen.
I think, you know, when he was talking about some of the things they were going to do on the first level, I forget what they labeled it, but whatever was at BMT, and he had the acronym DOGS, right? And one thing that stuck out to me was they talked about airfield repair. And I know a few years ago now, I've been removed for 5 years almost from the Air Force, 9 from security forces. But I remember there was a time where they were talking about making that special capable airman where you could defend the base, refuel a plane, and
Sure.
drive a truck, right? As he talked about those things, I kind of thought about that. Is this going to help jumpstart that or move that along quick, because you're building some of those other things inside the mines and at the foundational level, so you can expand on that as troops go into their respective career fields and make more multi-capable airmen.
Well, like they talked about the maintainer piece, Woody. What did you think about when they were talking about the maintainer piece?
Well, so maintenance in itself is kind of has its own metamorphosis, revolutionary metamorphosis going on in the background that would be very convoluted to get into here. But I'll say those who know what I'm talking about, I think it's a good thing, at least on paper. We'll see how it is in practice. But two acronyms or two phrases I did not hear in the AFSA speech were ACE, Agile Combat Employment, and Jason mentioned it, MCA, Multi-Capable Airman.
Right.
But I think really that's what we're getting at. So, probably about 8 years ago, going back to 2018, we started this concept of Agile Combat Employment, ACE, talking about defending and running offensive operations out of the Pacific Theater, where you would island hop and you would disperse your assets and you would send in small teams of multi-capable airmen, small agile teams to perform, multiple functions, defend the base, launch the aircraft, recover the aircraft, feed the troops, and then pack up and get to the next FOB. My problem with it back then was, and again, to quote our beloved former SecDef Rummy, Disco Don Rumsfeld, you go to war with the army you have, not the army you want, right? And so that's what the Air Force started doing about 8 years ago, was toying around with the ACE concept and trying to figure out how to implement a multi-capable airman fighting force. And my problem with it back then and throughout the rest of my time on active duty was that there was no centralized plan. There was no centralized cohesion, and it was kind of left up to the field units to figure out how they were going to implement ACE. When I was at the 388th Fighter Wing at Hill, at my last assignment, they had the Lightning Technician program out there for the F-35 program, and that was basically where it was a multi-capable maintainer. We took maintainers from various AFSCs, so they brought the knowledge of the AFSC they were trained in, and then we trained them on aircraft launch and recovery tasks. That's not something that every maintainer does, but those are fundamental to aircraft sortie generation. So why wouldn't every maintainer need to know how to do that? So we at Hill, we had our version of that. Luke had their version of that. Kadena had their version of that. We were all kind of exercising and implementing the same sort of concept, albeit different ways in a decentralized manner, right, with nothing codified. And so, long story short, I didn't hear ACE, I didn't hear MCA, but reading between the lines, it sounds like the Air Force is finally getting serious about training us like we've training the airmen how the airmen are going to fight. My frustration was they put the cart before the horse. They started to implement before we were training to that, but the benefit of hindsight, I think probably over the last 6 or 8 years and a lot of those localized efforts, they've kind of, my guess is that they've consolidated that feedback, and a lot of that feedback has gone into this new wider training plan.
Yeah, so I'm curious, Woody. I mean, I know that, yes, all those things, I agree. I think the Air Force is finally coming around and realizing that all this talking we've been doing over the last 5 to 10 years, we need to poop or get off the pot, and I think we're getting off the pot. But I'm curious, an opinion from you, because you have 2 staff sergeants and 1 newly promoted. Congratulations, Marley, if
Thank
you're
you.
watching.
Yeah, my daughter just got promoted, made staff. Yep.
So you have 2 of the Air Force's newest / youngest staff sergeants out there. Have you heard anything from them? I mean, don't have to say if you heard it from them or not, but what do you think for them? What do you think this means for them as brand new staff sergeants?
I think what it means for them is that they're going to have an opportunity if the Air Force follows through with this, and we can get into this later. I love what the Chiefs were talking about. I was thinking, yes, we're finally going to do this right. But we've all seen throughout our careers, we've seen big ideas before, and we've seen big changes before, and a lot of those things are done kind of half-ass and then just quietly like pushed to the side and forgotten about after a few years. So
Right.
I love it, but I'm a little bit skeptical. That said, if the Air Force follows through on this thing, I think, my kids who are both young E5s, I think they're young enough and early enough in their careers to where they can take some of these things, the air-based defense stuff, the multi-capable airman stuff, the ACE stuff, and they can internalize and influence. Whereas, man, I'll be honest, like, I even said it in my retirement speech. I threw all the poop out on the floor. Like, I was like, hey, I love the ACE and the MCA concept, but I'm old. I don't want to learn how to do it, so I'm retiring. Like, I think we need to do it. I think we should do it. But you guys go ahead. I'm out. Like, I was programmed to fight a different type of war, right? But I think back to our time when we came in, we were training to fight the Cold War. We were still fighting the Cold War in the way we trained. And then over time, when we were young NCOs, we get into the war on terror. So I think my kids are now at a point in their careers where we were when the war on terror kicked off, where we were able to, absorb the lessons learned from Afghanistan and Iraq and reprogram. And so for the majority of our careers, we adjusted to the war on terror away from the Cold War. And I think that's the transition my kids are going through now. They're adjusting away from the war on terror to the great power competition.
Yeah. They
That made me think. Oh, go ahead.
go. Nope. Go.
No, it made me think of something though. You and I can't remember if they talked about it or one of you mentioned it, or maybe me and you, Brady, talked about how to that point of we trained to the previous war, right? And I remember before I went to Camp Buka, or while I was in training for Camp Buka, we had people come back from boots on ground, right? And they would come for like 2 or 3 weeks, maybe the whole course, I don't remember. But they were giving feedback on stuff like, hey, you're training this, but this isn't actually how it goes. This is how that TTP is. And I remember we were in one scenario, and whatever the rank of the person was, I think it was a captain or master sergeant, maybe both. They were trying to give that advice, and the cadre was like, no, we have to teach this thing. Maybe you can get that in the next curriculum for the next group. But by that point, the TTP had changed because
Where was that?
Camp Buka.
No, the
Oh,
training
I'm
you were
sorry.
doing.
McGregor, Camp McGregor.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So Jason, let me piggyback on you again, because during the AFSA talk, one of the chiefs on multiple occasions had mentioned, like, I don't want to hear this. An airman shows up to their first base out of training, and the first thing we tell them is to forget all that crap. And that's something I've heard a lot, and that's something that was said to me when I showed up. But not to discredit the chief, I think that statement is taken in the wrong context because of what you just said, Jason. We're training to fight the global war on terror, but through basic training and tech school, etc. And then you show up to your first base, and we're not fighting the war on terror anymore. We're acing and
Checking
we're
IDs at the
MCA
gate or something.
yeah. So the field evolves faster than the training world does. And so I think there's more to that statement than, forget all that stuff you learned in tech school and basic training. You're in the real Air Force now. I think there's a little more behind that statement than just what you learned was crap. If you read between the lines on that, it's like, hey, we're out here doing it on a daily basis. So, close your mouth and keep your eyes and ears open and learn some practical everyday stuff that we're doing out here in the operational Air Force.
Yeah, big time. I agree.
Yeah, so that was a note I took when I watched the video probably 3 times just to get some talking points and to write some things down. And one of the things I wrote down is, if BMT is not carried forward at the bases, it all fails anyway. So there was a comment in there about I don't care about the frozen middle. The frozen middle needs to take a hike, or I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but I was telling Jason at work today, like, you can't just disregard the frozen middle. You can't do that. If you just disregard the frozen middle, then you're missing 80% of the people that are going to impact every airman coming out of basic and tech school.
Well,
You need to unfreeze the frozen middle and get them on board in order for this to work, because if they come out of tech school or basic and they're fired up and motivated and they run into that wall like in the ice wall in Game of Thrones, and it ain't moving. And to your point, Woody and Jason, like you're not most likely, unless you go overseas somewhere or something like that, you are most likely not going to be doing that at your first stateside base.
Yeah, and if you think about, I was lucky, man. My first base, I was at all great bases, right? But my first base, Davis Monthan, um, we trained so much and we had so many opportunities to do stuff. It wasn't even funny. And I remember deploying on my first deployment to PSAP, and there was someone from like Columbus, and we were talking on post, and he was talking about how boring his base was, and it didn't do anything. The mission was boring, blah blah blah, right? And I didn't understand it, and I couldn't comprehend, because in my mind, every base operated the same way, minus maybe the aircraft were different, but
Right.
security forces, you did the same things. And then as I progressed and went to other places and dealt with people, I started to realize more and more, no, that's not true. It's not as fluid as I thought.
yeah. Well, in Brady, I would throw into that, unfreezing the frozen middle. That's more than just, again, that's more than just cynicism. That, to me, that's okay. Air Force comes up with this great plan, and we're going to start it in basic training, and we're going to carry it forward into tech school. And if you want that to continue, the frozen middle, the 90% of folks who are out in the operational Air Force, fund us and give us the infrastructure to execute that continuous training mission.
Yeah.
They're talking about doing exercises and simulating deploying across the base and doing sleep deprivation, and I think all that's great. I think we should do that stuff. But if we don't have the funding and the infrastructure to execute that at every major base across the United States Air Force, then yes, then those things fizzle out after tech school.
Dude, as a prime firsthand example, and I don't know if you were not involved in it, Jason, but if you saw it, but several years ago in security forces, when I was at FE Warren, the career field had this push on Defender PT tests needed to be like the Marine Corps PT test or whatever. And my commander and I, we pushed those things because we were very, very warrior mindset, PT mindset, all these things. And the expectations were high in the 890th. And the airmen did phenomenal, receiving that, for the most part. But what you just said, Woody, was, in my opinion, the reason why those things did not work, because we had all these things that we sent people TDY to do this test and do this thing, and you needed this specialized equipment, and you needed a rower, and you needed this, and you needed that. And then, okay, hey, the squadrons asked for that money to buy that equipment to prepare for that stuff or to evaluate and do those tests, and we're like, yep, we ain't got the money for that. Okay, well,
Yeah.
and that lingered for a couple years trying to get to that, and all the pushes and all the videos and all the meetings and all the things that were done to get us right there, and then to say, oh, never mind, we can't do that. It was ridiculous and wasted so much time, created so much stress, and did these things, and quite honestly made us look silly. Now, in our unit, we were already doing those types of things. And was everybody ready for that? No, but we were already running towards that flag. We just never had to capture that flag. We just went back and did the Air Force PT test, but that is, to your point, 100% funding, manpower, resources. If it's not there when they leave, then it's what are we doing?
Yeah. Well, and I think another challenge to implementing is, you know, the Air Force is different than the other services in that we have, in the Air Force, we have a real world day to day in garrison mission. Whereas, you know, the Army and the Marine Corps, and I don't know, maybe the Navy's more akin to the Air Force, but their day to day in garrison mission is training. Like, you show up, you do your PT, you go take a shower, get some breakfast, come back, go to the range, go sleep in a hole in the ground, you know, do maneuvers, I mean, whatever that is, you know.
Right.
That is their day-to-day mission in garrison is training. That's what you do. Whereas we have and I'm not, you know, this is just the nature of the services. I'm not saying, you know, we're better because we have
Sure.
a real world in garrison mission,
Sure.
but those are the facts. Like, we do. And so, you know, to go back, you know, you were talking about PT real quick. We're all old enough to remember when the PT program was relaunched in the early 2000s. And the mandate back then was all units are mandated to do unit PT 3 days a week.
And you need a PTL.
And you need a PTL and
You
all this
have
other
to have
stuff.
a PTL.
And in maintenance, we tried to make that work. And it was like, but because you still had a real world mission happening on the flight line, like, well, hey, we're so-and-so. It's time to start unit PT. Oh, well, they're back. They had to launch. You know, they had to stay behind to launch. And then of course, over time, within a year and a half, I mean, that kind of fizzled out. And it was like, yeah, just, you know, make sure you're doing PT on your own at least 3 days a week. You know, so, you know, not to turn this into a PT thing, but you know, Sec War's come out and he's put his foot down. He's like, no, you're going to do it. So figure it out. And it sounds
PT
to me like they're figuring it out.
PT was and I wrote it down, like right out of their mouth, out of the guy on the left, the chief on the left's mouth. PT was one of the top 3 reasons they changed it. We're going to do it 6 days a week, 90 minutes, no exceptions. The train is coming. Either get on it or get ran over. I mean, it sounded pretty serious that PT was going to be ramped up.
I hope it is. I mean, I hope it is. I mean, I know it's something the 3 of us always took seriously, and you know, that's one of the things that is within your individual span of control is your individual 100%. Fitness. And hey, I would welcome it. Like, if I'm going to do that on Uncle Sam's time and not Woody's time, huh.
Yeah, the problem is, you know, and I think I told this story to you. We got a hood out of Woody. It just registered. You know, when I was a flight chief, we were in 12s at the time, Panama, and I was very, very hardcore about PT. And unless it was whatever the temperature was below the AFI, we were doing it after work. And when I look back now, like, yeah, it sucked. It sucked bad. And a lot of my troops probably hated it. I don't know that it helped them as much as I would like, because a lot of them were young, and it may have helped a couple, you know?
Yeah.
But on top of their 12-hour shift in that Panama schedule, I'm now adding another hour to form up and do PT. And I stuck by it hardcore, like very, very hardcore. We were going to do PT.
Yeah. And
it came with a cost, is my point. And that was a tough thing that a tough decision I had to make, to say, yes, we're going to do this. And not every flight chief did.
Yeah, that was a solution we explored in maintenance as well. As you know, when we couldn't quite get everybody there because of launch and recovery times and this and that, it was like, oh, we'll just extend the duty day. You know, like, okay, that's an answer. I don't know if that's the right answer per se, but that is an answer.
So you're probably lucky Airman NCO page didn't exist back then.
Bro. Yes. You know what's funny, man? My last unit was a maintenance unit, rescue maintenance, and our commander, shout out to now Fulbird St. Peter, Jason St. Peter. Nothing like you would think a maintenance commander was. He just didn't fit that mold. Phenomenal leader, right? He had a rule. He built a gym in our unit, took some office space, built a little gym, and his rule was to the flight chiefs, figure it out. If you can't do it, Like if you can't get them into that gym, it was a part of our unit right off outside the hangars. Figure it out, but allow them some time at some point. And it may not be every day for everybody, but within
Yeah.
their work cycle, you need to figure it out. And they did, you know. I mean, it may be go throw the weights around and run on the treadmill with your uniform on and then go recover the helicopters, but they figured it out. But it took a lot of effort on his part, going back to that point earlier about you got that one person very passionate, that officer very passionate about that thing, and you got that frozen middle, those senior NCOs like, oh, this is bullshit. We ain't got time for that. You know, we got to turn these wrenches, blah, blah, blah. And him like, cool. But figure it out. You're still going to turn the wrenches. You're still going to get all the other shit done. And also you're going to give time in this environment that I created for the troops.
Yeah. We kind of did a similar thing in the 890. We kind of focused it on, well, in the missile fields, each MAF, Missile Alert Facility, had a gym like in a garage. But we used, sandbags, brute force sandbags to kind of allow for you could do PT anywhere with that sandbag. You didn't really need a whole lot of equipment to do things. Neither here nor there, but yeah, we kind of did the same thing in the unit as we were trying to stand up that new PT test and all those kind of things. But it worked while we were there, and I think I told you this, Jason. All that stuff, that we created, is now gone in the unit. They painted over the heritage wall and all this other kind of stuff. That's a story for a different day. I wanted to talk about one other thing about BMT that was mentioned early in. Was TCCC. Either one of you ever TCCC or CLS certified?
Yep.
Yes.
Both.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts about incorporating that into BMT?
I'll tell you what. So I think it's good exposure for BMT. However, that's of course TCCC. That's an annual requirement. But when I went through the combat lifesaver course at Fort Carson, that was some of the best training I ever had. Some of the most realistic training. I mean, we had blood squirting.
Yep.
We were shoving the nasopharyngeal airways
Yep.
down up each other's nose. We were doing the whole thing. They tried to make it realistic. We had smoke grenades out there. We had air cannons going off in the background, and it was really good training. Do I think something like that would be good for basic? Yeah, absolutely. But here's my, I won't say problem, but there is a problem with introducing some of this stuff in basic training when 100% of those new trainees are there and they're just in survival mode. Like anything that they retain is a bonus. Like the only thing those trainees care about is not getting recycled and graduating on time and getting the hell out of there. And if they can
Introduce a
retain some
needle.
of that, then I think that's a bonus. So I hope the
And now they're going to get recycled quicker with the PT, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So
Hey,
I think
I'm a-
it's good to expose them to it, but I hope there's no expectation for like a true retention. I'm sure some things will be retained, but one of those things we need to continue on through the pipeline.
Yeah. Hey, I'm gonna need you to put that needle right there in that vein, or you're gonna have to do this all over again.
Yeah.
And we've done sleep deprivation now. They're talking about putting sleep deprivation in basic, which is fine, right? So you're doing your TCCC or your CLS, and all right, I'm gonna need you to start that IV, Airman Harrelson. I haven't slept in about 19 hours, and I'm laying there like he's sticking me. He ain't sticking me.
Yeah.
Ain't happening.
Yeah.
I truly hope that all the things they talked about come to fruition. I truly do.
I hope they do too. And, okay, they're going to build a mock air base at Lackland, and I think that's great. And, they've got exercises planned, and, we're changing the mentality and trying to instill the ethos sooner. And I think all that's great. But if it doesn't extend to everyday life out in the operational Air Force, it's not gonna stick.
Yep.
And unfortunately, we have examples of that from the past.
Absolutely.
I will say, Brady, I don't know if you were going to bring this up or not, but before I forget, one thing, I think it was Chief Bickley. One thing I love that he said, and I've said this for years, so I'm going to say he stole it from me. But, all the other services, hey, I'm a soldier, I'm a Marine, I'm a sailor. You get to the Air Force, I'm a cop, I'm a maintainer, I'm a port dog. We're very tribal in the Air Force when it comes to our AFSCs. We identify with our AFSC not as being an airman. Now, I don't know if I think it's a little cheesy to for the chief to pick up the phone and say, Airman Bickley, like, okay, appreciate
he said it was a running joke between him and somebody else, but then he was like, and we're serious. We need to start. It's not a disgrace to do that, but why do you have a running joke?
Right. Well, I don't want to beat him up, but I love that, absolutely. and he's so right. Marines are Marines first, soldiers are soldiers first. When you're an airman, you're fill in the blank with your AFSC first. That's the mentality. Unfortunately.
Yeah, but I've been in a lot of joint environments, and I've never heard a Navy answer the phone, Sailor Lansing.
I thought about that too. That's a good point.
Shout out to Jackie Lansing.
Yeah. Shout out Jackie.
That's a good point.
I do agree, like that identity thing. And until so I think the first question was, well, are you going to change the ranks? Because that is a legit rank. That's how you address a lower ranking person, right? Yeah. So I don't know, man. I agree with the concept or the premise of an identity. But this is airman, blah, blah, blah. Man, get the fuck out of my face.
Well,
I want to hear the song.
Hey, I don't know if Facebook will allow that.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah. I forgot where.
As I was.
But I think, though, if you're serious about implementing the multi-capable airman concept, I think a serious implementation of that concept goes a long way to changing the mindset of I'm an airman first.
Sure. 100%. I don't disagree at all. I think, again, I was on board with dang near everything that they were talking about. But you guys know me. I'm I'm not diagnosed OCD or anything, but there are
you should
when you get fired up, you say things and you lose, and I've done this, right? You lose where you're at in the moment, right? And to be, in my opinion, to be on that stage at an AFSA conference and to message it some of the ways that these were messaged in the way they were messaged kind of detracted from the message they were trying to carry, in my opinion. Like we want, and I'll use the airman as an example. We want you to, Marines say Marine, soldiers say so, all these things, right? And then, we need to get back to, when I've got this running joke with Chief so-and-so that when I call her, she says Airman so-and-so, and I say Airman Bickley. No, don't say that. If it's something that we're trying to push and make serious, then be serious about it. Don't say you're making a joke out of it, and then we need y'all to do this. That was the only thing I disagreed with in that thing, was just the presentation or the message and how it was put out there, personally. But again, just like you, Woody, I'm not trying to beat anybody up. These are all opinions, and we're entitled to them. So, and I'm not on active duty, and I'm not living his life. So, preach, brother. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, hey, they're out there rolling this plan out to the entire Air Force through the AFSA conference, and you got to roll it out at some point. And there was clearly some passion behind it. I think all three of those chiefs believe in what they're doing. I think they believe in what they've built, and I hope they succeed. I'm behind them 100%. I got a vested interest. I got 2 kids in the Air Force.
Absolutely.
But I've been around a long time, and I've seen big talk before. So I hope this has some ass behind it. and they can put it into execution.
Yeah. I was telling another buddy of mine yesterday, day before, whenever I first got the video, again, and I'll say it again, I 100% want everything that they said to happen. I think it would be the best thing that ever happened to the Air Force. I'll support however I can support. You know, if Bunker BS can, you know, help preach it, let's preach it. All the airmen out there need this in their lives. So I hope you take it serious when this hits the street. It absolutely needs to happen. But, and this gets to the check in the box part that I want to talk about with you guys. I just feel having spent almost 30 years in the Air Force, seeing a lot of boxes being checked, you know, whether it was for exercises, whether it was for training, whether it was for a CBT you had to do, cyber, whatever it was, there is so too much, you know, lack of leadership ownership, in my opinion, for this to go flawlessly. You know, and Chief Renfro said it in the latter part of the video that they tied in at the end of the conference, was if these three chiefs and the other chiefs don't have the support of the MAGCOM commanders, don't have the support of the MAGCOM command chiefs and the CFMs and the squadron commanders and all these things that just trickle down to that frozen middle that we said we didn't care about, this will not be successful. It just won't be.
I agree.
There is zero chance that this works if there's not support on a massive level. Now flip that coin, you've all been in squadrons. You've all been in groups, and you've all been on a wing or a base or somewhere. The amount of work, resources, manpower, and time that it's going to take to support this is where I think it's going to be the toughest.
Yes.
Right? Hands down going to be the toughest.
Yeah, 1,000%, man. Like, you know, and I was thinking about something, you know, because we've talked about box checking a lot lately, and I do hate it. I don't agree with it. I try not to do it, but I also understand why it's done, and I've definitely been a part of it, right? So, for example, I don't know, 2013, 2014, there was a training thing that come down, adjusting our annual training hours. And at the time, security forces had to do 240 training hours of stuff, all these tasks, and they had these hours outlined. Now, could some of those tasks be covered in less than the time allotted? Absolutely. But we had people saying, no, you will spend 4 hours training on task X, right? So that 240 hours equates to 30 like duty days, or 38-hour days, if you will. Well, that was just the Air Force task. Now let's talk about, or let me rephrase that. That was the security forces task, the big picture security forces task. Now let's talk about your local task, because I was overseas and we had host nation requirements that we had to meet. So let's say there's another 30 hours of things. And then you got your CBRN and your flight line driver's training and your, I don't know, pick another thing, right? I got 45 days of training that I have to complete a year on top of working whatever my schedule is. And I don't get to leave work every single time I'm doing those training days on a day off, right? So you get into a box checking mode because they put so many requirements on top of you that just aren't actually manageable at the ground level to be effective to that task. And I don't know if it was that way for you guys, Woody.
Right,
I know.
I think it absolutely was, but I want to break in real quick and kind of, while you're talking about that, Jason, I had a question that came in that I want to show you guys. Do we think, what's our opinion? Do we think the Air Force is trying to implement this mindset, or is it just throwing things to see if it sticks?
I think it's a mindset. I would hope.
I think based on what I saw, I think that I think those chiefs up there were serious about changing the mindset. Now, again, and this ties back to implementation. and unfreezing the frozen middle, I think you have to have the buy-in at the level of execution. So whatever this looks like, I think it has to be packaged up and sent down to the local level, and then that group commander, fill in the group here, medical, maintenance group, whatever, mission support group, and you pull your senior NCOs in a room, and here is the plan, like they used to say, create the felt need for change first, right? So let's give them the why. Let's tell them why the change. Let's explain how we're going to implement the change, and then let's also talk about, because let's be real, the day-to-day still has to go on. So how does the new change, how does the new way of doing business, how does that coexist with our day-to-day mission requirements? I think that has to be packaged up and messaged individually at the local level with the senior NCOs first. I think you got to get those folks in a room, explain the why, lay it out flat, and then let them carry that message forward.
Yeah. Shout out to Big Fish, man. He's on here giving some comments about, I'll show you real quick. Former TI, he's done it all. But hey, man, we appreciate you. Thanks for commenting down there. Hunter, I hope that answered your question. If you're still on there, I appreciate it. But
excuse me. No, I'm sorry. I'm about to choke on myself. I got so fired up.
Got him all nervous up there.
Hey,
you so saucy, you choked on yourself.
Hey. Excuse me.
Were you going to say something?
I was. But they're going back to these like warrior ethos and stuff. There's things that have been implemented over the years and became a thing, right? You said, excuse me, Brady, you went to Beast Week or whatever they called it.
I did.
I understand you have an opinion about it, but that wasn't a thing when I went through basic training. So, sure. and the war wasn't what it was before I went through basic training, right? So I know our previous leaders tried to do things to make it more current, right, within their what they could.
Yeah.
So it's not like we were stuck in 2026 in the 1950 way, right?
True. Yes, everything you're saying is accurate, and I agree with you. My problem, or it's not really a disagreement, but my problem is we've had a lot of good ideas, but we lacked the follow through. Beast Week, okay, Beast stands for something. I don't remember what it stands for. I don't really care. But Beast Week, when I went over there from the 343rd, I don't know why, but there were not like visits from Chiefs to Beast Week, and there weren't visits from anybody, senior NCOs, to tech school. There wasn't anything like that. So I go over there, I'm like, I have to ask permission to go over to Beast Week to talk when they're done, when they're coming out of the field and they're under this big overhang with these big fans. And I'm like, hey, can I come over there and just kind of try to take a couple MTLs and meet with the defenders who are getting ready to come to tech school and give them some motivational words and some standards words? And it was like, I was trying to remove them from training and be like, you're too good for this. It was crazy. The hoops, like, I'm just trying to come over there and provide some input to the folks that are coming to me. And then when you get there and you see, there used to be an obstacle course, but we didn't have the funding to get it repaired, so we don't do that anymore. We don't do this, we don't do that because of that. And I'm like, okay. So that was, yes, leaders at some point had some motivation, had some ideas, tried to implement some things, but then there wasn't follow through from Big Air Force.
That's a great thing that you brought up too about the O course, right? Because they don't do that anymore. Is that correct?
Correct.
Right.
Well, they may be doing it today. I don't know.
I do remember someone saying they had stopped for a while, but that's a great example of something that was a thing that kind of put that warrior ethos. I remember doing that course, I remember some of the slugs that sucked at stuff, couldn't march right or whatever, but getting out there and yelling and hollering and getting dirty, and they felt good afterwards, and they felt like they were a
But
part of
yeah,
something. And the fact that someone either let it go unfunded or took the value out of it, that those types of things drive me nuts. And I used to hate it when I'd be in a unit and like a new commander would come in, and I saw this a couple of times where they would be like, "Oh, whatever that last person did, we ain't doing that no more. It's my show, and now I have to put this big stamp on my unit," as opposed to, "Hey, this unit is a good unit. There's some heritage here. There's some strong things here. We're gonna make it better." You know what I mean? I went through
yeah,
units that went through identity crises, whatever. I was in one unit for 7 years, and what, six commanders, five commanders? Every other commander, we're changing the whole thing up. And it's like, why? What was wrong with us being this?
yeah,
But then I go to Lakenheath, and the maintenance, 48th maintenance, their bulldogs roll them out. They've been bulldogs roll them out since 1963. And guess what? They ain't changing that shit. You know what I mean? They're sticking to some of those foundational things that made them great at one point and continue to make them great.
yeah. It there's just again, I go back to what I said a little bit earlier. There's just so much on the back end of this that if BMT does this and does it right, there's just so much on the back end once these folks leave Lackland or their tech school, wherever that is, that I hope it's not all for nothing based on there wasn't the follow through at the bases, there wasn't support at the bases, there wasn't resources, whatever it is, or these senior NCOs that they talk about, or the NCOs that frozen middle, like, yep, it's a real Air Force, we're not doing that here, and then it just stops. That to me is the critical piece. The check in the box stuffs are the stuff that I wanted to also talk about tonight. Another thing that will kill this BMT revolution or evolution, whatever you want to call it, will be checking the box mindset. That whole, we talked about the support that they have to have. They have to have the support from the command teams and the NCOs and the middle tiers and all that. But what you also cannot have is, hey, we did this TCCC thing in basic or CLS or whatever, which to Woody's point is an annual refresh. It's not like you do it once and you're good to go for the next 25 years. That's an annual thing, right? So we do this in training in BMT and tech school, but then we don't do it at a base and the cert just falls off. Then what did we gain? We gained some HUA down in BMT and some stuff, and then we don't follow through and do those things, and we just check that box. It's just like go ahead.
I was going to say, in so much of the training that we put ourselves through is, not all of it. Let's be serious. Not all of it is relevant training, but
Sure.
a lot of it is, and a lot of that training is if you don't use it, you lose it.
Sure.
That's why we should be doing things like TCCC at least on an annual basis. That's why we should be doing air-based defense exercises on a regular basis, minimum annual. And sometimes we're just not doing those things, and those skills are perishable. You'll retain some things, but when you got bullets whizzing past your head.
Well, yeah, it's as an example, right, of checking the box, and I was talking to Jason about it today. Coming through the gate, man, I'm telling you, I have one of my biggest, before I started doing what I'm doing now on base, was I don't want to work on a base because I don't want to have to go through the gate every day. And with my mindset, I don't want to go through the gate every day and see things, and then I'm not going to become that person who's doing this thing, right? But I'm going on, I don't know, 2.5 years now working on base, and I came through the gate today, and we're in exercise FP-Con Charlie, which is a heightened thing. Like you should at least be, and I hate this, faking it to make it. You should at least be aware enough that you're on a gate where thousands of people are coming through and you've got the sign up that says, hey, we're doing this thing, at least try. At least try. Well, they weren't. And, you know, the defender is all kitted up, but not kitted up, if that makes sense. Like, all kitted up, but not kitted up. And then immediately to the right, the person, the augmentee, had a reflective vest on. Like, what are we trying to say?
Yeah.
What are we doing? We're checking that box to say we did this exercise and we did this realistic. No, you didn't. And you should be ashamed of yourself, leadership of that place. You should be ashamed, because no one coming through that gate takes you seriously now. And that's your fault. Now, I also know, again, and I was telling Jason, I also know that even though you may be a chief or a senior or a major or a lieutenant colonel and a squadron commander or a squadron, you can't necessarily make that thing happen. You're at the mercy of, you're not at the top. You know, you have to eat what's handed to you. You don't have to like it, and you can control your little sphere of influence. But I didn't see anybody controlling spheres of influence. Why? Because they don't, in my opinion, they don't care. They're okay with checking the box. And what I see when people check the box, whether it's training, whatever it is, I see loss of resource, I see loss of manpower, I see loss of funds, I see loss of life. That's what checking the box to me means, but that doesn't mean that to everybody else. And that is blaringly obvious to me. I get off my soapbox. What you got?
No, I just, back on the exercise thing, I think to myself, like, if that were real world, and I know we're just talking about the gate, if that were real world and you had an Augie on the gate that wasn't kitted up, or let me back up. Would you have that Augie on the gate if there was no kit to kit that Augie up with?
No.
No, you would just reduce your lanes down and to single point or whatever, and the folks outside the gate waiting in line to get in they'd have to live with it, right?
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, train like you fight. So would we had a bunch of pissed off civilians here at Wright-Patterson backed all the way up to Route 844? Yeah, maybe, but hey, we're doing an exercise here.
Yeah, 1,000%, man. I go back to some of my bases, man, and I had such great experiences where, I was stationed at Kunsan, and Kunsan, we know how Korea is. But even when I went to Yokota, dude, when I went to Yokota 0205, when the Peninsula exercised, we exercised. And some of the best exercises I was ever in were at Yokota. Now, the whole base maybe didn't play as far as the entire perimeter because of host nation things, but our wing leadership, they created this environment where certain parts of the base, we treated every single thing the way you would in an exercise, and it ended up being like a mock base inside of the base. And it was so hardcore for an outside, the Peninsula type environment. And I was lucky to be a part of those things. And I remember PCS into my next base, and it was the complete opposite. And I was just so frustrated. And I'm like, man, this is garbage. I know it can be done. I've seen it be done. Why aren't we doing that? And then after another iteration of commanders, we got back to that thing, of doing it the way you're supposed to do it. Now, I will say this was also during the big surge of Iraq. And so you had those kinds of constraints. And you got to think about those things too, man. What are those other operational things that you have to do, and you can't do everything to its fullest capacity? Because there's going to be challenges with everything you do, right? I feel sorry for the wing commander here and the chief here, because I know they probably deal with locals on traffic, and the populace and all the stars and birds around. I can only imagine the headaches they have with those things. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I firsthand know those things, and I don't want to say like I don't care what people think. I do care what people think, but there are some things that people think that I don't care, right? I say this a lot. Everybody makes a choice every day they wake up. People out there that are in the military made a choice and decided to do this thing. You sought me out. You wanted to be on my team. Sure, we got recruiters, but you had to decide you want to be on this team. You want to be a Defense Department civilian worker on a base. You're making that choice. If you don't like what comes with doing that thing, then go somewhere else. Or appreciate the job you have and the requirements that come with that and do those things. Everybody has a choice, right? Make it. People won't do that. And the reason, in my opinion, that they don't do those things is, and I've told you this, is there's such a lack of accountability. Well, what does that look like, Brady? What does accountability look like for the person that runs, well, I can't say runs the gate because there's immediate accountability for that.
We hope.
Yeah, there will be. It's just, man, I don't want to go off on another tangent, but I just think it all bleeds together. Lack of accountability, lack of ownership, people making choices of where they want to work, where they don't want to work. They choose to work somewhere that has rules and regulations and things that you are not supposed to do, but yet we don't really want to do those things and nobody says anything about it. And then we get into a position where we fail an inspection, or I could give you a million examples from different bases of things that people didn't care about that we were lucky nobody died from, because if somebody had died and they had peeled back that onion, there would have been some gross mismanagement and lack of leadership and accountability across the board. Rolling a Humvee is one of those things. But anyway, we can do a podcast on that someday if you want to, but those are just my opinions on checking boxes and why, to me, checking a box and not doing the thing is such an egregious leadership failure. I'm off my soapbox. Sorry.
No, real quick on checking boxes and how it ties into training like we fight. Anybody who's ever been to Kunsan Air Base, if the three chiefs on the stage at AFSA really want to implement this air-based defense mentality, ACE-MCA mentality, and do it on a regular basis, I mean, look no further than Kunsan Air Base. I mean,
sure.
The Wolfpack, I mean, they're exercising minimum four times a year. They're not cutting corners. They're doing the whole thing. Wolfpack's getting down over there. And there's a whole lot of other reasons that morale at Kunsan has historically been extremely high, probably the highest in the Air Force. But one of those reasons is because they're not checking boxes over there. They're training like they fight. Like, I don't think people stateside realize what kind of tension is really on the Korean Peninsula.
They don't.
I mean, it's a real daily threat over there, and the Wolfpack trains like they fight over there. So I don't know. I think when it comes to, let's not just check the box, let's actually train like we fight. Go spend a few weeks, go spend a month, go spend a quarter over at the Wolfpack and take a page out of their book.
I would think that's why people avoid those assignments. One of the major reasons they don't want to go over there is that.
Absolutely.
Best assignment I ever had. Best assignment.
I kid you not. This just happened last week. So one of my good friends was in town. His daughter's active duty at a PACAF base. I won't say which one or their name. And he's prior security forces. His wife was prior security forces. So we're talking, and he's like, man, let me tell you about this crap my daughter's doing right now. And she's in some medical unit. I can't remember which one, but on this base. They're in a wing level exercise, CBRN exercise, right? So she FaceTimes him, and I'm in the car when this happens. And she's like, hey, Dad, I'm just doing my bar sweeps. And he's like, huh? First of all, with your phone? And she's like, oh, yeah. They said we can take it out in case we got to call someone. It's like, okay. And then he's like, well, wait a minute. If you're doing par sweeps, that means you're in alarm black, right? So you should be like mopped up. And she was like, oh yeah, they said it was too hot, so we don't have to do that. And I said, and his wife jumped in and was like, excuse me? Because she had done time in Korea, like
Yeah.
he had too. Like, they had experienced the suck. And they were both like, you got to be kidding me. This cannot be real, And she was dead serious. She was clueless as to why they were feeling so passionate about it. And going back to your point on checking the box, man, how if that 100% was as accurate as she made it sound, how much of a failure is that in preparing those people that are those follow-on forces for that thing across that strip of water for the peninsula? You know what I mean? Like, huge failure.
Yeah.
But let's check the box because we have to do it. We don't want to hurt feelings, and we don't want to make people tired, and we don't want to make them uncomfortable. Whatever the excuse is.
And in the military, man, on active duty, sorry, Woody, I'll get this out and then you go.
Yeah.
On active duty, it's not like if you say put your phones away, you're going to lose your. I mean, you might piss people off, you might make somebody angry, but it's not like you're going to get fired and be unemployed. Even if you get relieved of duty and are unemployed, you're still getting a paycheck. So push the envelope, folks. Do what's right. Challenge. I was given this example at the academy, and you may have heard it from the same guy I did, Woody, and Big Fish was there with us. He gave this analogy of this boat in the middle of a lake, and the water's all calm, and you're out in the middle of this lake, and you're just stuck. And you're not going anywhere, and you're not doing anything, and nothing's happening. The wind's not blowing, so you're stuck in the middle of this lake. How do you change that? You create waves. You rock the boat. And once the boat starts rocking, those waves go to the shore, create some churn and some sand. But what also happens with those waves? They bounce back and come back and start pushing you around and moving you in a direction. Don't be the boat in the middle of the lake on smooth water. Create some ripples, folks. Good grief. Go, Woody.
Oh yeah, I love that. I vaguely remember that story. But I was just gonna tell a quick check the box exercise story.
Let's
the
go.
first exercise I'd ever done. I was a young NCO at Pope Air Force Base back when it was still an Air Force base, and so we were doing we had some leadership who had recently come from the Wolf Pack, and so they were going to bring that mentality to Pope, and so they put on this big wing wide exercise. And it was a sea burn exercise, and we were going to do the whole thing, and then when it came down to it, there was a requirement to stack sandbags around the building. I forget what it was, like 3 feet high or 4 feet high or whatever it was. Well, instead of filling the sandbags and stacking them around the building, we ran surveyor's tape 3 or 4 feet high around the building and stuck a paper sign on it that said simulated sandbags.
Oh my goodness.
So we checked a box for our sandbags. Now, would it have sucked filling and stacking sandbags? Absolutely. But in hindsight, we probably should have just done the damn sandbags.
Yeah, you probably should have.
But we checked the box.
You probably shouldn't have told that story. Anyway, fellas, hey, I appreciate the conversation. I think it was a great conversation. I appreciate y'all taking time out of your evenings, to entertain Brady and his talk about BMT changes and checking boxes. And I hope the folks out there listening, we're just trying to make a difference. The three of us, again, I'll say this every time. The reason Bunker BS is now a podcast and we're doing our first live is so that we can put some of these things that we learned over our 20 plus years each of time in the Air Force as junior NCOs, airmen, senior NCOs, chiefs, whatever it is, lessons that we learned that you may not have learned yet, and we don't want you to learn it the hard way because you don't have to learn it the hard way, right? And the message that I want to leave everybody with is do not be afraid to challenge the status quo. Do not be afraid to step out of the norm. Yes, it may be difficult. You may get looked at cross-eyed and weird by your peers or whatever, but that's okay. It's totally okay. If they were your friends and true peers and supported you, then they wouldn't be looking at you cross-eyed. Right? So you guys got any last comments before I wrap it up?
I would just say I really hope the Air Force succeeds in implementing the new plan here. You know, the skeptic in me, you know, is alive and well. Just because I've seen big ideas that the Big Blues put out before, but I'm really pulling for them. I think this is the right thing to do. I think it's the right time to do it. So for the sake of the airmen out there, I hope it actually gets done and there's some follow through.
Yeah, I agree, man. I'm gonna piggyback you, Woody. I think success is the key, right? I want every part of our Air Force, any branch of our service, and just our country to be successful, no matter what the success is. And I want to support them. So I hope that they're putting the right pieces in the right place, and it does become what they expect it to be.
Hey, so great stuff,
And don't
guys.
check boxes.
Absolutely.
Don't check boxes.
Don't check any boxes around me because I'll put you in a box. No, I'm just kidding. I won't put you in a box. I don't know Facebook. I'm sorry. But hey, I got to shout out Lieutenant Colonel Mike Bates here, man. This guy was, in my opinion, the cadet when I was at the academy. The cadet. And was my training NCO. I think it was an NCO. I don't really remember exactly, but he was in charge of training in my first year. And hey, man, I know you're not checking boxes, and I appreciate you. I just had to shout you out a little bit because we haven't talked in a long time. We got Dylan on here, fellas. He's on here as well. Big Fish, Hunter. Hey, I was told at the academy again, you know, you may not be impacting 1 million people yet, and you may not reach 4,500 cadets, Brady, but you're making impact on 1 or 2, you're making an impact. Angie Evans, shout out if you ever listen to this. That goes to you, my friend. And with that being said, fellas, again, I appreciate your time. And as always, folks, do the work and lead better. Bunker Bullshit out.
Dang, Brady, you got a cadet that's a lieutenant colonel. That makes you old as shit.